Live from Palm Springs, California. We are definitely celebrating in our own way the 100th anniversary of the glorious Federico Fellini, who was, of course, a family friend. And this is the soundtrack by Nino Rota of his movie 8 Weeks and a Half, which was also a small part by my grandmother, who also resided in the film Rome. And it's with great pleasure that I am here again with the mighty Pew. And of course, we have from Jerusalem, Lowell. And then we have Roseanne, Barr. And then we have from Detroit, John Barnwell. Hey, John, I heard that they're sending all the coronavirus Chinese at your house soon because the only airport which is accepting flights from China is in Detroit. So that's a good thing. And then we have Reverend David William Perry, the one and only openly gay priest. And of course, and of course we are a team here of great eclecticism, and we are celebrating for that reason Federico Fellini, who definitely created and inspired so much cinema. And cinema without Fellini will not be the same, because he really created techniques that were really pioneeristic at the time. These days, I must say that in comparison, most film directors are a bunch of wannabes and don't have a clue on anything concerning real cinema. But that's another thing that we're going to maybe touch another time. Today, we wanted to discuss, of course, the ongoing coronavirus, which now has reached over 100 deaths. There is cruise ships which are kept offshore, isolated, with the people more and more contaminated by this coronavirus. And China doesn't want to really give the results of their test to show really the origins of this coronavirus. So that's very suspicious. And all this, of course, in a situation in which globalism, we will witness in the next few weeks the weakness of globalism. Because when you make your clothes in China, if you are an Italian company, or you make spare parts for your car, for your computer, Apple, and all of these things came to fruition because of one single man. One single man. His name is Henry Kissinger. And so we're going to have to discuss also with the mighty panel here, Henry Kissinger. We start, so I mean, these days, people think that the coronavirus will affect only China because that's where most of the cases are. But it will soon affect the rest of the world when you're not going to have all these things that were produced in China. And we got China to produce all these things because it was Nixon, and then the head of the CIA at the time, George Bush Senior, who decided to open up China to the world. And China, though, is not a democratic place. China is a place that is going to show all its weakness in the coming days, and it's already showing all its weakness. I mean, they are basically sealing people alive in their houses. They're doing things that are completely against the human, the respect of a human person, no? Because China is a godless society with no God. Is a society in the hands of communists, in the hands of a communist elite from the time of Mao Zedong. And actually, Mao Zedong, concerning Mao Zedong, there was the assistant director of Federico Fellini who was present at my birth at the Gemelli Hospital back on the 5th of March 1970. And when I was born, I actually looked a little bit Chinese. And so he said, geez, he looks like Mao Zedong. So that was my take. So guys, welcome, and let's start talking about what is happening, because the weakness of globalism is something that I would like to discuss. I mean, there is certain positive aspects about globalism, Roseanne, but we're gonna be seeing a lot of also weaknesses in the next few weeks when this whole China thing is gonna affect the rest of the planet. What's your take on it?
Well, is that true? I'm not sure it's going to affect the rest of the planet. I'm not altogether sure about that. I don't know what's going to happen. It's terrifying to think that there's 100 people a day dying over there, and there's no infrastructure at all to treat them. The modern day miracle of socialized medicine, I suppose. It's a good lesson in that. But yeah, there's just people dying in the streets, and they have no treatment, and it's just horrifying.
And the one that are actually brought to the facility, Roseanne, apparently they left there without any food at times. So it's like maybe they have built in a record time these 2 hospitals, but then they don't have any food. They're not serving any food to these poor people who are there. So, I mean, what's the point? Let them starve? I mean...
Well, China has a great history of killing its own people for a long, long time.
Unfortunately, and I mentioned at the beginning this figure who still is regarded as the biggest gatekeeper for China from everyone in the business. I mean, with Tim Cook had to go and discuss the latest business regarding parts in his computers and his iPhones. He called somebody I know and said, "Can I speak with Henry Kissinger?" Because Henry Kissinger is the gatekeeper of China. So what's your take on this Sabbatean Frankist / heretic Jew?
Well, he is a mass murderer for sure. He's insane. And I guess he's just so diabolically genius that they can't, they can't look the other way from him. I don't know. I don't know how he is allowed to do anything. And, he also set up the PNAC too. So it seems like everything globalist does come out of him.
Yes. Lowell, your take on Henry Kissinger. I'm sure that you will give us a scholarly approach on all his aspects. Voice, Lowell, you have to open the mic. Okay.
Hi. Greetings to Leo and Roseanne, John, Reverend David William from the land of Israel, city of God, Jerusalem, hill of the priests, overlooking the Temple Mount, where we hope that the third and final Israelite temple of Jerusalem, as per Ezekiel 40 through 48, will soon be under reconstruction. And I want to start on a positive note before we get to the bad news, that it is now the 15th of Shvat, Tu B'Shvat, the new year for trees.
Yay!
And we're unusually, as far someone told me, we've been getting nonstop rainfall. There's also snow in Mount Hermon for about 2 months. And someone told me at the check that we're getting more rainfall in this time period than since the precipitation began to be recorded at the beginning of the 1800s. And that is very good for the land of Israel. I would ask, before I say something about Dr. Kissinger, and I learned well about him from my Jedi master, John Charles Lincoln Hulley, may I share with you some very bad news about China from a very reliable source. I wrote it down. His name is Dr. Paul Cottrell. You can see his YouTube channel and his website. He puts up daily updates about what's really going on in China. He has a degree in microbiology, among many other degrees, something like that. He knows what he's talking about. And I check him every day. I learned about him from Jesse Waltman of BP Earthwatch. He's located in Louisiana. He's a scientist, and he's very good on saying what's going on inside the Earth, around the Earth, beams of energy from outer space. And I learned about Paul Cottrell from him. And I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad tidings. I think Dr. Cottrell knows what he's talking about. And this is what he said today. In his presentation on the coronavirus and increased SO2 over Wuhan. To say, what is SO2? We're about to find out in a moment what SO2 is and why that makes a difference. Quote, it echoes the Holocaust. There's a Holocaust-esque thing going on here, where there's totalitarianism, then it gets out of control, and there's mass amounts of death and burning of bodies. And as a fellow Jew, it shakes the core of my soul to see this happen. And I feel like I have to do something about this. So if someone can look into the sulfur dioxide increases relative to burning of bodies and just confirm that that is a signature of mass burnings, which I suspect it is, then I would appreciate it so we can have another data point on what's really going on. Because if there's that much sulfur dioxide over Wuhan, then the death toll is much higher, much higher than we think. It's much higher than 800. It's in the tens of thousands. It's, if not the hundreds of thousands. And I've been following Dr. Cottrell for about a week, and I know enough to know he knows what he's talking about. He's a very responsible person. And he is very agitated about the data that's coming to him and that he's putting out. Zero Hedge put out a report, was it yesterday, saying that 400 million people in China can't leave their homes. What's that, a third of the population? Going on a half? 400 million. I believe, I already had seen reports about Wuhan with the buzzards or there's a certain bird that eats dead bodies there with masses of them flying above the city. I saw the video. And now he's talking about an increase in sulfur, what is it called? Sulfur dioxide, which is associated with dead bodies. He says the amount above that city is far above the normal range. I'd like to hold my comments on Dr. Kissinger for more bad news, going back 50 years. And I'd like to defer to John and Reverend David William, having started off with that bad news, and I believe he's right, and then come back to it later, if that's all right.
Fine with me.
Thank you, Lowell. I will say
now I'm going to mute my mic.
No. It's very good that you mute your mic in case we have feedbacks. So, John, you also announced last week, like I did on this channel various times, that this is a man-made virus. Definitely the fact that China doesn't want to really be honest in communicating to us the research that they're doing starts to really point towards that direction. And they don't really want to give us information on which is the animal that is communicating this virus. I mean, there is been a lot of talk about bats, but also like Zero Edge pointed out yesterday, bats can be inoculated with this man-made virus and become, of course, the transmitters of it. So that's also another point that confirms what you discussed last week, John.
Well, hi, everybody.
Hi.
Yeah, this is always interesting because I get messages about subjects and then I get to find out what we're actually going to talk about. But basically, an important dimension to this whole story is what's come up as of late, and it's been shared by Alex and friends, the idea that it's essentially a race and gender-specific targeted bioweapon virus, essentially. So that it's targeted at Chinese men, basically, which is in keeping with the population figures in China. There's way too many men around and not enough wives to go around. So that's one demographic take that a Chinese bureaucrat could find this a very handy solution. These are the kind of things that we have to keep our eyes open, because with the development of the CRISPR technology, now they can edit genes. They can literally splice into genes and cause these types of manifestations. Now we know the coronavirus itself, it was patented some time ago, and it's a company that's tied in with the whole nexus of.
Yeah, I wanted to actually stop you a second on this point here, because some debunking sites have said, oh, well, it's not correct, there's no information about this institute in England. But in reality, when I actually went on the website of the institute, John, that you mentioned, which is connected to that aristocrat, member of the previous Security Council and all the rest, they actually are admitting to some extent their involvement.
Well, I mean, all you need to do is look at the patent document that I posted and see who holds the patent on coronavirus. And then you get into saying, okay, well, who's involved with the Wuhan facilities that were nearby that could have such a thing on hand. And when you start connecting the dots on it, yeah, they want you to talk about bats. Bats have been around forever. And bats are interesting in terms of virology and bacteriology and all that, because they have very different immune systems than we do, so that they can tolerate higher levels of pathogen than we can. For reasons of biological resources, whatever gets too complicated. But when you get into what's come out from India, from the scientists in India, they're very specific about this, saying that they were able to examine it and find markers for gene editing, and also have overturned the view that is a race-specific, gender-specific pathogen, and that it's a targeted bioweapon. And so I guess, that being said, what Leo said about Detroit, yeah, we have a major international terminal here with a lot of traffic from China. And
because it's news from yesterday that they said that the only terminal in the US that will be kept open with China is Detroit. So, I mean, it's incredible that these people that don't want to completely isolate China like the rest of the countries have done, and they are leaving. I mean, once you leave one single airport open to this possibility in the US, you're basically welcoming the virus for the whole of the rest, because then you can't control it anymore. One guy arrives in Detroit, then he goes to New York, then he comes back, he goes to California. So I mean, they are not operating in the right way. Now I have a question, a very specific question for Reverend David. This is of great interest. I have been following the work for many years of the late Father Malachi Martin, who was capable of reading the real first secret of Fatima. And he actually said these words, which are connected to the coronavirus. And I think it's very interesting that we connect also the first secret of Fatima with the coronavirus. Father Malachi said, because Fatima is a very apocalyptic message. It says that no matter what happens, there are going to be terrible wars. There are going to be diseases. Whole nations are going to be wiped out. There are going to be 3 days of darkness. There are going to be epidemics that will wipe out whole nations overnight. Part of the earth will be washed away at sea, and violent tornadoes and storms is not a nice message at all. So this is Father Malachi Martin, who died in 1999. We all know he was he was basically the secretary of Cardinal Bea. He himself was very close to Israel. He didn't defrock completely himself. He kept the oath of chastity, but left the Jesuits and came here in the US to work as an exorcist for many years. And Father Malachi Martin did some excellent work. So, Father David, what do you think of this unheard, and the majority of people now have the official version of the First Secret of Fatima. That, of course, is a wish-washed version that was put together by Ratzinger and his associates. What do you think of it all?
Oh, I mean, I've been following particularly John's posts during the week and finding myself sinking into more and more despair. I mean, are there no depths to which human depravity won't sink into? I was called naive, by the way, midweek. There were ministers fraternal, you know, when everybody gets together and there's a good bitching session without the laity being there. I was called naive because I didn't believe in all this sex trafficking to the, you know, the levels that it is. And I didn't believe in all this paedophilia to the levels that it is. And I still find it staggering. The fact that people may manufacture these diseases, these epidemics, I mean, it's no surprise. I mean, the good father had prophetic gifts. He studied the supernatural his whole life. He made lots of people very uneasy because he had a very matter-of-fact attitude to it all. You know, his work is, I mean, we both share a passion, Leo. We both like Montague Summers, but he's an eccentric at the end of the day, whereas Father Martin was not, which is why he was ostracized to such an extent. People simply didn't want to listen, and I suspect they still don't. I mean, let me add an aside there. I was in Bishkek a couple of years ago, and talking to the Chinese chargé d'affaires. The Central Asians around me, the Kyrgyz, didn't want to talk to him, and it was just me and him, you know, nattering away because they're trying to revive the Silk Road, but they don't want human beings involved. So they're creating robotic trains that build each other and don't need human collaboration whatsoever. So all of the jobs the Central Asians thought were coming in their direction weren't, as they were proved utterly superfluous at this genuinely imperialistic move on the part of China. I went to forgive me for this long preamble. I went to a supper that evening with an old friend of mine, Sultan Rayev, who was a very senior government official and a dramaturg. I mean, a playwright, a dramaturg of immense skill. And I said to him, well, did you hear what I was talking about to the Chinese chargé d'affaires during the day? And he said, look, we're all people of the Abrahamic faith. We're all people that have a moral code, a moral outlook. If you say to a Central Asian soldier, go and shoot that guy through the head, he will do it, but he will know it is wrong. If you say that to a Chinese soldier, he will do it, but he will not know it is wrong. You know, I mean, the Central Asians aren't fools because and I'm not against the Chinese, and I'm not saying everyone's a monster in China. I am saying there are massive cultural distinctions of a type we tend to forget. And, you know, it frightened my dear beloved Central Asian brothers and sisters to such an extent, it made me listen a lot more carefully to what was being said around me. I think Father Martin probably was the best interpreter for the mysteries of Fatima as they're released into the public domain. I pray with every fibre of my being and heart that these are not the times he's referring to. But Leo, my dear brothers and my dear sister, I fear they are. And I would do next to anything to make sure they weren't, but I fear they are. You know, manufactured viruses, people not caring about a single thing in the world, targeting parts of the population, you know, gender active diseases with an ethnic, you know, an ethnic hunger. Is there no end to it all? Father Malachi must be read a great deal more carefully, but they're only still partially in the public domain, Leo. All of those mysteries are still, to my mind, heavily under lock and key, and they really don't want to genuinely release the ins and outs of all of it, because the people I know in Vatican City would be horrified and terrified at, you know, what the implications would be. And for once, I 100% agree with them. You know, it's a row from beginning to end. But for once, I agree with them, Leo.
Well, that's your point of view, of course. So we might not all agree. Definitely, unleashing panic upon the planet is not a great thing. So I understand your point of view. Definitely, Roseanne, please give us your point of view on Father Malachi Martin's take on the first secret of Fatima.
I like the last secret that says this will be the last pope.
Well, that is of course an interpretation of one of course of concerning not Malachi Martin but Malachi, the prophecies of Malachi, which are of course much older and come from a guy who was Irish. Not John, you are Irish, you know very well.
But I mean, they all track up. I mean, if you think of UN Agenda 21, think of the UN,
absolutely,
and think of the Pope, then it really makes some sense because it describe accurately these times.
The governor of Florida just blocked Agenda 21 down in Florida.
I saw that. That's amazing. I don't know.
So what is happening in Florida, John?
Well, Agenda 21 is the educational format of the United Nations. And he wrote an executive order, a governor's executive order, stating that it was no longer a program within the state of Florida. So, boom, they're gone. And that's kind of like programming central, Agenda 21. It's taking education and getting you to think the way they want you to.
Yeah, that's Common Core too, and they're kicking that out all over the country.
Well, it's Common Core specifically that he targeted of the Agenda 21 program, but he's going in that direction. And you kind of wonder, are they really going to get rid of the Department of Education? You know, like is Betsy DeVos really going to do what she supposedly was supposed to do and get rid of the thing that was it's a creature. The education department is a creature of Jimmy Carter's administration. You know, it's tied in with Zbigniew Brzezinski and Kissinger and that whole crowd. And we could talk for hours on end. I mean, when Henry Kissinger first came to Washington, he was taken in. There's an article available about Kissinger on the magazine, anyways, the hippie magazine of all things. But in any event, he was told that because Kissinger was an expert in Russian affairs and all this stuff, and he had all these degrees, and he was told, well, okay, forget everything you know because it's basically wrong, and you're going to be here a while, and as you find out what's actually going on, you're going to get angry because you'll feel like a fool for you going around and talking to these people that they know and you didn't know, and they just would sit there and listen to you and nod, knowing that that's not actually what's going on. And it's basically to that effect. I'm paraphrasing greatly. But as he said, after a while, then, you know, you'll be like one of them. You know, it won't bother you anymore, and you just basically.
I'm curious to know if Roseanne ever met Henry Kissinger.
No, I have never met him. I was always afraid to meet him. I should have met him when I had the opportunity, but I was afraid to be around that because I think that matter jumps on you.
Okay, so you were afraid of being contaminated by his evil in some way. That's an interesting take, you know, John. It's kind of esoteric, like evil can jump from person to person like a virus.
It comes through the eyes.
That's why maybe I think Tom Cruise doesn't want anybody on set to ever watch him in the eyes, apart from his Scientology fixations. He has this particular fixation. Nobody can watch him in the eyes. The eyes are a very powerful tool of transmission.
Yeah, they are. That's why television is, and fake news and all the other stuff that all the stuff we take in we digest through our eyes. And as they say, the eyes are the window to the soul. And that's because they're directly connected to the soul in Kabbalah. So you can like take in through your eyes like poison. So I do avoid people, but everyone says I'm eccentric anyway.
Well, in reality, Kabbalah comes, remember, from the word kibel, which is like reception, tradition. So it's about receiving something. No, Lowell.
Yes, I don't know where to start. You mentioned Henry Kissinger, but I always like to put things in a biblical timeline and prophetic perspective as I understand it. Now, you've just heard what Dr. Paul Cottrell said he thinks is going on in Wuhan, and that's just Wuhan, where the number of deaths may be in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. And he's not a person he's very conservative when he speaks. So how does this fit within anything? If I'm understanding what's going on right in terms of prophetic history from our point of view, we are in the last 2 years of the Shemitah year cycle, 5780 and 5781. 5780 is 2019 to 2020, and 5781 is 2020 through 2021. It seemed, according to Jeremiah, the final redemption will dwarf the redemption of the Israelites from Egypt. It will be a global redemption for all peoples from every Egypt. My light just went off here. And the plagues of the final redemption will dwarf the plagues of Egypt and will be global. Now, having said that, where are we? What happened last week? We had the phony impeachment process that was finished. We had the SOTU, State of the Union address by President Trump. You could say that those letters stand for something else. It could be the spirit of the Union address, the soul of the Union address, the spirit or soul of the Unifications address, or the Shiftei Yisrael of the Unifications address, related to the unification of the 12 tribes of Israel. And as I've said before, I believe the primary branches of the 12 tribes of Israel, aside from the children of Judah and Benjamin, those who have come back to the land of Israel, the Pashtun in the east, in Afghanistan and Pakistan. That's about 50 million people, 25 million in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and the Anglo-Celts in the west. Now, this is a belief. We don't know until Elijah will come with the Messiah, who's what. But that is what I believe. So in order to destroy the Erev Rav that we've spoken about before, and Amalek, this requires the combined power of good people in all the tribes and the entire world. Now, President Trump, his mother is from Scotland, Mary Ann MacLeod from the village of Tong, the island of Lewis and Harris, the Outer Hebrides, Israelite Scotland forever. That's my belief. And he may very well be Mashiach ben Yosef. He's certainly more than just a politician. This is a prophetic figure. What did we read about yesterday? Because we also believe that the unfolding of world events follows what we read about in the 52 readings from the Torah as we go through the cycle year after year. Yesterday, we read about Bishalach. Israel goes out of Egypt to the Red Sea. Pharaoh follows them. The Pharaoh and the Egyptian army are drowned. Some sources say Pharaoh wasn't drowned and repented afterwards. And Miriam and Moses sing their song at the sea. What is the final words of Parshat Bishalach? In the end, Israel goes out, and Amalek comes and attacks Israel. That's important to know who Amalek is. Isaac had two sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob had a son named Judah, another one named Joseph. So the grandsons of Isaac are Judah and Joseph, from whom come Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David, the primary princes representing the two branches of the 12 tribes. Who's Amalek? He's also part of the family. He is the grandson of Esau through Eliphaz. He's the great-grandson of Isaac. So there's a real connection there genetically, physically, and spiritually. Most people think the Nazis regarded Jews as Untermenschen. They did not. They had a special name for Jews, the Gegenrasse, the anti-race. As powerful as we are, but representing the opposite side of the coin, and is absolutely right. The Amalekites represent Satan, his fallen angels and demons, and everything horrible you can possibly think of, and they're smart as hell, and correctly regarded the Jews in part or whole as the Gagan race, the anti-race, which had to be totally destroyed in a final solution. So what are the last words of the Parsha from yesterday? Because today's Sunday. That Amalek comes and attacks Israel. And it says, Joshua, it's very short, verse 17, chapter 17, verses 13 through 16. And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword, but didn't destroy them totally, as Saul also didn't. So what does God say to Moses, which applies right now? And the Lord said to Moses, write this for memorial in the book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, for I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called the name of it Adonai Nissi. And he said, and it's a very strange verse, there's a hand, Yad al-Kes Yad, there's a hand on the throne of God. The Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. There's a further verse in Deuteronomy where Moses says, when God has given you rest from all your enemies round about, you'll go and you'll wipe them off the face of the earth and from the heavens. That's exactly where we are now. President Trump and the Patriots, he secured the throne in Washington after 3 years. He's fought off all his enemies. Now a person could say, well, let's move on. No, that's where the fun begins. That's where you don't say, okay, it's fine. Leave them alone. Hillary's an old lady. She's an old lady. Well, so was Jezebel and Natalia. She's an evil old lady. This is the time where President Trump and the Patriots, Roseanne said the rats have sharp teeth. The Patriots have sharper teeth because the Patriots are dragons, not rats. Big claws and sharp teeth. They have money, they have weapons, and they have supersonic brains. And the role of the Patriots now, all the Patriots all over the world, in every country, is to gather together and blot out the memory of Amalek and the Erev Rav from under the heaven. Don't let anyone go, like Elijah with the priests of Baal, let not one escape. That means they get arrested, they better put on trial, and they get sentenced, gets executed, whatever it is. If you want to be charitable, you can say shaming people in public is worse than being put to death because you have a living death when you're alive. That's one way of looking at it. Either way, anyone involved with theft, murder, and rape, violating the Noachide covenant and laws, no one escapes. Hold on, Lee, I got one thing to say.
Lowell, I actually to point out before I forget, because we always talk about the Jewish grandmothers, but Nancy Pelosi, the daughter, said on Fox that she acted in a typical way of the Italian grandmother. Now, there has been a lot of people in Italy very upset about this comparison with Italian grandmothers tearing things apart and getting pissed off. Okay, maybe it happens at times, but to my knowledge, Nancy Pelosi is simply an insane individual driven by some demons.
Nancy Pelosi is demonically possessed.
Yeah.
As is Hillary, as is Adam Schiff. As Roseanne says, look at their eyes. These people are demonically possessed, and they may have very little free will left. They become like the golems. No disrespect to the golem of Prague. Now, this is what I want to conclude with about President Trump. When he got into office, he started from the bottom up to lift up the economy. He went right for people, blacks, Hispanics, and others who don't have fancy college degrees, which don't mean anything anymore anyway, and brought back the factories and put them back to work because ain't Kemach, ain't Torah. If people didn't have food, clothes, a little place to live, and a paycheck coming in, you can't talk about spirituality.
That's right.
But now, and this is my concluding remark, having secured the throne after 3 years of fighting off these monsters, in taking out the bad guys are going to start from the top down. When it came to lifting up the widows, orphans, the poor, the stranger, the humiliated, the degraded, the deplorables, putting them back to work, he started from the bottom up. But now he's not going to go after like they've done for years. Oh, you stole the candy bar from the Macola. You smoke a little marijuana, put you in jail for 20 years. He's start from the top up with the public faces, such as we know and those behind them, the bigger boys, such as George Soros and the Rockefellers and the Rothschild, and as Roseanne said, the bigger boys over there, the gnomes of Zurich in Switzerland. So to conclude my devar tour is, no one escapes, and they know it. That's why they've gone to releasing their Amalekite Andromeda strain, their doomsday weapon. If we're going, everybody's going. They won't succeed, but they may take a good chunk of the planet with them. It's the communist Chinese Chernobyl. I'm not the first one to say that, but I think I'm the first one to make up the Amalekite Andromeda strain. That's the novel by Michael Crichton about this virus that can kill off the world. And there's a great book and movie. I saw it many years ago. He's no longer alive. I have other comments, but I'll hold them till later. That's where we are in the prophetic agenda now, with Purim coming up and Passover coming up in these years. These are the final plagues of the final redemption. And this is the final ultimate. When they had in January 20th, the Wannsee conference under Reinhard Obergruppenführer Reinhard Heydrich said, that's it. We're going to wipe out the Jews of Europe. You know what? We're going to return the courtesy next 2 years. And if it's not finished by the end of this Shemitah year cycle, give us another 7. And again, you can run to New Zealand and your Nazi UFO bases in, assuming they exist in Antarctica. We're going to find you everywhere in those Nazi centers in northern Argentina where Hitler went to, because nobody escapes. That's it. I've said enough.
Well, actually, it seems to be a little bit in line with this new TV series where Al Pacino and a bunch of stormtroopers go after some Nazis in some improbable ways. But I mean, it's obviously fiction, but it's also reality, because after the Second World War, there was a lot of Nazis protected mainly by the Catholic Church who got away with murder, escaping in South America, most of them. Others, of course, even here in the US, if they were regarded as an asset, they were used even by NASA. We know that then the war, the enemy became communism rather than Nazism. So let's discuss a little bit the subject that I initially pointed out today, globalism. And I will start with John. Is it a good or a bad thing, globalism, John?
Well, first you have to come to terms with what it means. And the way I tend to look at it, because that's where I base my worldview, is coming out of Christology, or the doctrine of Jesus Christ. And if I fail in that regard, that's just my purely human failing. But if you look at those that are posing as representatives of that impulse within the world at large, and you look at Rome, you see that you have two entities. You have the Holy See, and then you have the Vatican. They're not the same thing. The Vatican, as we know it, came into being in 1929. It's basically, it's kind of like in Godfather, where Michael Corleone is meeting with all these big, powerful people in Rome, and he's starting Immobiliare, the real estate company. That's basically the Vatican.
Well, there were various stages. I would say the first stage was actually the recognition of the Vatican State a few years earlier by Mussolini in the Lateran Pact.
But I'm speaking in terms of contractual relations between governing bodies of what we'll call the plenary oligarchy.
Yes.
The global oligarchic presence, which is what everybody's been making reference to, but they don't like to be spoken of directly. But they have various organizations and foundations which they function through that are extra national. But in essence, basically what you could say is, well, it's confusing to people that we have two popes. We have Pope Ratzinger, and then we have Pope Francis. And Pope Ratzinger, Pope Benedict, he's cool.
But actually, if it's sorry if I interrupt you, but the Lateran Pact of 1929 are the incipit of all this, because Italy basically recognized Vatican as a state. And I think that is a big mistake. It was a big mistake by the Italians, who had fought against the Vatican state to unify Italy, because it was in the middle now. And in fact, a couple of days ago, I had a chat with the son of a former Italian prime minister who died in 1999 in exile, Bettino Craxi, his son Bobo Craxi. And I actually said, I think, and his father in the early 80s renewed the Lateran Pax for Italy. And I said, listen, I think that, okay, Italy got maybe a little bit better deals than he got at the time of Mussolini, but your father was still too indulgent in giving these people something that they shouldn't have in the first place. What does, the word of Jesus have to do with the implementation of a state?
Yeah, that's the challenge, because going back to the line that I was drawing, you see that essentially, as the spiritual head of the church, it's still Pope Benedict. See, that's what people don't understand, is that what Francis has done is he's taken over essentially the Roman Empire. He's the emperor of this whole super state that we'll call the Vatican, and the separation of the spiritual powers goes still to Ratzinger, but he's basically held under essentially house arrest.
Yes, and actually the last week we have news that I put through on my website regarding Father Georg, his secretary. Oh. He has been sent away from the Vatican, basically sent away from his previous position as head of the papal household, because he has failed in isolating Ratzinger from scandals when he agreed to get Ratzinger to co-write this book, co-sign this book with Cardinal Sarah regarding the celibacy of priests, which for some reason made Pope Francis shout so loud that everybody in the Vatican heard him. And this is it has been confirmed by various sources. So the secretary of Pope Ratzinger, Father Georg, has been sent away, and now Ratzinger is on his own, because without his own secretary, without Father Georg, and it is really like he's being isolated even further. And he had this vineyard that was destroyed, literally destroyed last month. They went there and they destroyed his vineyard. I mean, it was very important for let's say, even psychologically for Pope Ratzinger, who is a very old man, to have this vineyard he would go and check out every now and then, and they just eliminated. So there is a real war here between two popes, but we know that Pope Francis is a Jesuit. We know that he might not be really the real Pope in charge, like you said, John, no? The real Pope in charge, when it comes down to the actual tradition, for the tradition, is still Pope Ratzinger.
Yes, of what people like to think that the Catholic Church represents, it's still Pope Benedict. He's the spiritual head of the church, and the temporal head is Pope Francis, with fulfilling the Jesuit takeover of the administrative realm, and that's when you get into the corporatism, and then that's where you really see that, because as far as contracts within the United States, we're always served under their relationship to the Holy See, and then to have the Vatican as a temporal entity asserting itself in this domain and attempting to wrest control over the assets of the Holy See, which
and John, let me interrupt you, because this week I published on my website the news that went all over the world with the confirmation that Pope Francis is a liberal Freemason. This confirmation was given by an hermit Franciscan monk, Brother Bugnolo, in an article that cites, though, a very credible source, somebody within the Argentinian intelligence, who went on TV, and actually I also shared the video, the original video from 2017, in which a phone call between two representatives, one of the Vatican intelligence, the other one from the Argentinian one, discussed the fact that the Pope was indeed a Freemason. And so we have also this other thing, you know, this.
Yeah, that's the other, because see, when you start getting into corporate law and all of that, then you have to involve London, see, because they are basically the administrators of corporate law that are actually licensed through Amsterdam and in Holland. You know, if you dig underneath the paperwork of all existing corporations, you'll find that they've all received their corporate status through this particular organization in Holland.
And we know that the Duke of Kent, who is the Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England, his son actually converted to Catholicism and married within the Vatican. So breaking with the Protestant tradition. I mean, most of these Protestants, like Tony Blair, serving the Vatican beast, in the end become Catholics at all effects, and just like Jacob Frank back in the days. So they get awarded, no? Roseanne, please.
Well, let's not forget that everything about the Vatican and the Pope is really tied up with the UN, because the Pope is the big decision maker of every program that emanates from the UN.
And also the World Health Organization and FAO, the Food and Health Administration, their administrative headquarters are in Rome. People don't know that all those conferences we have seen in the last few days, those updates from the World Health Organization, were actually conducted from an office that is in Rome. And it's only 500 meters from the Colosseum, and not so far from the Vatican, of course, but it's also very close to the other important headquarters of the Vatican, which is in San Giovanni in Laterano, which used to be the previous headquarters of the Vatican. So the Vatican definitely has a say even in the World Health Organization.
Yeah.
And people don't know that.
America, too, in the United States, the Catholic Church is like pretty much in control of our health care. In
yes.
the U.S.
A lot of people nowadays are afraid of discussing also another big problem that has surfaced not so long ago with the NHS in Great Britain. And Father David probably has heard of this problem when a close friend of Jeffrey Epstein gathered information about every single NHS member. So then this information could be sold and utilized by private health organizations. And a lot of people in Great Britain fear that going out of Europe means then embracing the private health lobby in the US. How realistic is that, David?
Firstly, apparently, I've got to say hello to my dear friends, Mia, and my Gideon family, my godchild, and sorry, I've just been told to say that. So, Anthony,
okay. That's good.
Oh, I mean, Leo, Britain isn't what it, it's not what it was. I mean, it's a bit like we're living in a third world hurricane state at the minute. That's not a metaphor. There's a hurricane blowing around my planet at the minute. Hurricanes have hit the country, apparently. The health service. You've got to remember that was founded. It was actually a Liberal Party idea that the socialists stole. They tend to steal all the Liberals' ideas and then try and do something with them after dumbing them down a great deal. It was put into place after the Second World War in its fetal form for one simple reason. The elite were frightened of all these young men coming back who knew how to fight, and they all had guns. Miracle of miracles, there's a health service. And I think the powers that be, and I don't mean for once the monsters, the demons of Downing Street or the monsters of Westminster, for once I don't mean them. The real elite are quite interested in turning the health service into some sort of self-inducing medical system. No, I mean, what was once a great treasure is very, very quickly turning into an inept and a rather terrifying monstrosity, you know, which I don't think can be stopped at this stage, because nobody's really got the health service at its heart. You know, that the fact that you can have free medical advice on entry and sort everything out from there, which of course...
But there is also a lot of hypocrisy. I'm showing here on the screen Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones, who comes to the United States and pays for heart valve replacement surgery instead of using England's socialized healthcare. He then goes on tour attacking the president of the US and lecturing about how we all need socialist healthcare system. So is this whole thing working or not working? It seems like there is a lot of hypocrisy, though, at work.
Oh, I mean, you know, if I had the money, I'd be on private healthcare. You know, I mean, what they did was, and not really Margaret Thatcher. She was so complex as a person. You know, it was people. I mean, the Thatcher legacy, to my mind, is like a shot across the bows of later governments, saying this far and no further. Otherwise, you know, it's not British if we go any further. What becomes revolutionized and capitalized, and I don't mean that as a pejorative, you know, actually all of a sudden aims towards the third world, which is happening here at the minute. You know, there was I can't remember offhand, there was a Tory think tank in the 80s which used to fox me no end. Why are they studying Latin American economic systems? What have they got to teach Great Britain? I think there's the Pew needs to discuss that at some point, who they were, what their makeup was, and what they were up to. And they
were up to a lot of pedophilia in the Conservative Party.
Yeah. Oh, look, I don't, God, in case I get arrested, you know, we all know who they are, and half of them ended up in Brussels anyway, and the other half got knighthoods. I mean, you know, no, the health.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to say another thing that's controversial. Oh God, it's a week of reminiscing. Am I becoming an old cleric? Heavens above! You know, when I was a boy, what the BBC said was gospel. You knew it would say the truth, and everybody listened to it because it said the truth. I can't think of one person I know that would say that now. So, you know, I mean, the BBC is just a phenomenon to itself, but the health service is a sinking treasure, and it's falling apart. It's been increasingly politicized, and it isn't what it was. And Mick Jagger ought to be ashamed of himself, because that's just total hypocrisy. But, you know, it's now two systems in one, Leo.
Yeah.
If you really need something done quickly, go on to the private side of healthcare. And if you don't, just get in the queue, and, you know, with any luck, you won't die in it. So that's the British Health Service now, not what it was. Not what it was.
Roseanne, thank you, David. And Roseanne, here in the US, we have been saying for months that we should really get down to discuss more serious topics than impeachment. And one of the more serious topics, which actually the price of pharmaceutical drugs. Isn't that the case here, Roseanne? We need to lower it because it's still too high.
Yeah, we need a working healthcare system in America that, you know, cuts out, you know, that isn't like just a giveaway to insurance companies. That's why it costs so much. I think that Trump will figure it out, or I hope he will. I think he'll end up being the healthcare president, because all you have to do is just look, like I always say about capitalists, the thing that bothers me about them and capitalism, though I am a capitalist, I'm not saying that I'm against it, but it never seems to factor in the true cost to human beings in its, you know, when it makes its books, when it keeps all those records. It never factors in the health of, well, I always say the children of this world ever. And so that's a false, that isn't real capitalism. It's a false something else. And, you know, because you have to be aware of the cost, or otherwise why have money? So I think, Trump is doing a lot about the Federal Reserve and our economic system, which is long overdue, to reboot that so that it works for people. And healthcare is a large part of that. I mean, United States in our country, this fight over healthcare has just been going on for decades and decades. And all they do is just first they take the first cut off the top, and then, the next amount of the fake cost is, not factored in either. It's just the cost of not having healthcare is far larger than, a workable system.
So Roseanne, is this everything you said? Is it really helping Bernie Sanders? Because it seems like Bernie Sanders, Matt Bernie, is actually getting in control of the Democratic Party because of this issue mainly.
Yeah, it is the issue. I mean, right after war and inflate and fiat money, currency, all those things factor in with healthcare too. It's just a sham. When you break your arm, you go, oh, I want to go to the doctor, but they've got us thinking, oh, I've got to call my health insurance guy. I got to call my insurance guy. I broke my arm. I mean, it's just ridiculous and absurd. It doesn't work. And I think, Trump needs to give some time and energy and thought to that. And let's get something that works for all the people of this country. And then the whole world will copy it. But you shouldn't have to pay the insurance agent to get your broken arm fixed.
Well said, Roseanne. Lowell, in Israel, how do you work around these health issues?
Well, I've been busy pulling up all sorts of stuff here. One of the great successes of the state of Israel, and I've said before and I'll say again, that the 70 years of the Zionist state of Israel from 1949 to 2019 is over, and we're now in the second 70 years, which I believe is the beginning of the restoration of the Israelite monarchy. And I want to say a little bit about what that means. But since we're talking, what? Yeah.
Can I say?
Please.
Yes. This phase of the Jewish experience is called Orot, and that is the age of enlightenment and intelligence, and we're into that now. So a lot of these things, I think a lot of solutions will be uncovered. I think that they already have all the solutions, but they just have kept them from us, like a cure for cancer and all this other stuff. But which that to me is globalism, when they they totally own the information and the knowledge, and the people can't have access to it. That's what globalism is. But anyway, I'm sorry, Lowell, but
it's okay. About the health, one of the great successes, because now that 70-year period is over, people can look back and say, what were the successes? What were the failures? Yes, we have to get rid of the remnants of the Erev Rav mixed multitude, Sitra Achra, Sabbatean Frankish labor Zionist dictatorship, which is embedded deep within the onion, right? Yes. Yeah. You
know what I call it for shorthand? We can use this. It's the Golem of Prague. That's what Sabbatean, and all of it. It's the Golem of Prague.
Okay, so what I wanted to show you was the amazing woman, Henrietta Zoll. For 1 year, I've been a volunteer at Hadassah Hospital in Kerem, Jerusalem. One of a single 5-foot tall powerhouse woman, Henrietta Zoll, that takes a dream, the story of Hadassah, created from nothing in 1909 what now is the world's largest women's organization, which is surprising. There are a lot of women in the world. The largest women's organization is a Jewish ladies' organization, and the world's oldest and largest. What do you say?
Mostly Jewish grandmothers.
Right. Back to the grandmothers we discussed last week. The Hadassah International Women's Zionist Organization's 2 books I got to read established a functioning Hadassah magazine. One of the infrastructure for the modern state of Israel's healthcare system was created by Jewish ladies and grandmas having
I don't have a piece of paper to tear up here. I wanted to play with a piece of paper so I could mimic Nancy Pelosi tearing up the speech, but I don't find it.
Oh, so this is a great success. When Ben Gurion established the state, at the beginning, there are now 5 healthcare plans. Every citizen, Jew, Arab, whoever, you must by law, I think even if you're on a tourist visa, you must be a member of a health plan. They're very reasonable for our whole family. What I pay $100 a month. Now, of course, it's best not to get sick anywhere. And it's best not to have rare diseases that need the world's greatest specialist.
But definitely,
So if you're not there,
Lowell is a great. I mean, it's a great price. I mean, it's affordable at least.
right. This is the whole point. Now, the Israel's hospitals have not kept pace with the size of the population, but people come from medical tourism from all over the Arab and Muslim world. Yeah.
They come from Gaza too, so the Palestinians, in effect, avail themselves to the Israeli healthcare
Right.
system.
One of the first things I was told by the head nurse, they put me in the oncology clinic. She said when I first arrived, she said, "Why doesn't anyone talk about the children who come from Gaza here?" And I said, "It's very simple, because most of the members of the foreign press, aside from the fact that they're uneducated and stupid, don't like Jews in Israel and don't want to talk about it. They just want to pay kids to throw rocks and say, oh, we had an incident." And some of them are thrown out for that. So the health system is filled with thousands and thousands of Arab nurses and doctors and orderlies. I have never heard even a single case anyone claimed that an Arab started screaming Allahu Akbar and started massacring Jews. It never happened. I never even heard a false claim, nor have I heard, well, Jewish doctors poisoned Arabs. They work together. The patients are together. And whenever someone gets fresh with me about Israel, I just send them a link to Connor. Who's that comedian? Connor O'Brien? There's an American, what's his name?
Conan
O'Brien. I think he's very funny. And he goes to visit a hospital Israel set up on the Golan where Syrians come across the border for treatment. And that pretty much shuts them up, because when someone puts up an obnoxious tweet to me, I use their tweet as my Bama platform to throw my stuff back at them. So they know the more they respond with their vague statements, I just put up links to fact. They don't like giving me that, and the conversation usually ends pretty quickly because they don't want people to know that. One of the primary reasons for the Jew hatred of the leaders of the Arab dictatorship is they don't want the people to look and see how much better life is for Arabs in Israel. So they've been throwing this at the Jews for 70 years because they can't provide anything. The Arab and Muslim world is a disaster, not including the Central Asian, ethnic, Turkic, Sunni Muslim majority countries. They're different. But they have a problem. So they have to keep, as one, don't want to go into it too much, but an Egyptian, when I was visiting my father at the Hebrew home in 2013 in the summer, I would stop at a bagel place on the way there in Riverdale and have my coffee and bagel and cream cheese for $1.50, a special deal. So there was an American kid with a baseball cap on backwards and the torn jeans, all that. And he said to me, I'm Egyptian. My parents are from Egypt. I said, okay. I'm from Israel. He said, my father and my grandfather can't lie to me anymore. I said, what? He said, they can't lie to us anymore. We all have smartphones and we can see that things are better in Israel than in the shit buckets that our families come from. Yeah. And they can't lie to us anymore. They've been lying to us and lying to us. Now lying, you don't have to be an Arab or Muslim to lie. It's passing the buck and lying started with Adam and Eve in the garden. But in Arab and Muslim culture, the level and the degree of make-believe and fantasy is something that I think is far greater than certainly in Western countries. People lie there too, of course. So he said, they can't lie to us anymore. All us kids just can look at our smartphones and see that things are better in Israel than for us. And there's a limit to how much you can blame our mess on the British, the French, the man in the moon, the Jews, and the Zionists. So
one thing that strikes me in Israel is, of course, you can see that people from of Jewish descent maybe occupy a land, they start growing things, and these things actually grow better than when you have Arabs in the same place, because growing things is also a product not only of something material, but also of something spiritual, no? Something that is brought out.
Roseanne.
Yes, Roseanne.
Yeah, and tonight is Tu B'Shvat, the anniversary of the trees, and it's an ecological holiday, one of our New Years. We have 4 New Years during a year, and it's the anniversary of the trees and of the celebration of the fruits of the earth. And, you know, also it's the time where people, we talked about the temple, the people brought their best fruits to the temple for charity. Our country, then Israel, Judea, it was based on, you don't want to say charity because you hate that word, but, you know, giving, taking care of, you know, the community.
Now,
And
Roseanne,
that's why it was so special.
Roseanne,
And so tonight is a big holiday, so it's going to be
I
great.
completely agree with the fact that definitely Judaism has retained that spiritual and mystical force that in a way affects the physical world. And John, you are, of course, close to Rudolf Steiner. You are close to somebody who came from a Rosicrucian Gnostic Christian perspective. And in this perspective, there was also healing that the Rosicrucians have always held as very important, healing through the use of certain plants, healing through the use of certain words, and healing through also the use even of certain letters of the alphabet that, of course, the Kabbalists know very well how to use. So how much of the work of Rudolf Steiner was dedicated to actually healing people?
Geez, well, that's a huge topic. I mean, anthroposophical medicine has been proven to be very, very effective, and it developed out of a series of lectures that he gave to doctors, and it's well worth investigating for anybody who's looking for some kind of approach. I think we've entered an age where people have to start taking responsibility for their own physical well-being through educating themselves, because now the capability is there and one can come to understand certain aspects of what health means. And so much of what's called disease isn't really disease. It's actually conditions that develop as a result of the proximity of certain things that aren't good for you. And if you can eliminate some of those things that aren't good for you, that's a good start. As far as all this stuff with globalism and global warming and all of that, and it's the year of the tree, yes. Well, many years ago, I went and planted 12,000 loblolly pine trees in Maryland. They're now 90 feet tall. And so I did my part. What have you done? You know, it's like, that's the way I look at these people. They sit there and they give lip service to all this stuff like Mick Jagger about healthcare. He's so full of, yes, he comes to the U.S. and to pay for the best healthcare, and yet he's recommending socialized, but he won't use it himself. You know? So,
right.
Yeah, and getting into understanding Rudolf Steiner's approach to it, it really, Ehrenfried Pfeiffer is a very, very key individual. He's the one who brought biodynamic gardening to America, and he's actually a key figure in my first book, The Arcana of the Grail Angel, because what is a grail? It on one level has to do with the nourishment. What can we do to create a receptacle? See, because in order to have something, like another aspect of the word Kabbalah means to receive. And it's developing a vehicle that's capable of receiving the blessing, or to be able to make the immanent aspect of the God manifest in the world, rather than just the transcendental, oh, he's way off up there somewhere. In being able to experience that, and Kabbalah is called the Shekinah, or Shekinah, as many people say in America now. But that's that whole idea of the actual presence of the working of God is seen in the world. And that's what the Ark of the Covenant was. It was a placement in the temple to where that relationship to the divine could be maintained. This has been overrun by crooks.
By groups, of course, connected to big pharmaceutical companies later on. And Roseanne, you wanted to say something about it?
It's Shahina.
Yeah, Shahina. Yeah, I see it.
Shahina.
Pronounce those words well in the pew, otherwise you're gonna be. We have here.
No, but it is about. It's. I like this deep subject.
Yeah. A lot of times when you say things properly, people don't know what you're talking about.
I know.
Now, in the Sefer Yetzirah, we divide the air, water, and flame, of course, Aleph, Mem, and Shin, no? And so it's like there is this division, and now is the time, what time are we living now, you think? Let's make this question first to you, Roseanne. What kind of time are we living? Are we living in the time of Aleph, Mem, or Shin?
Well, I have to say the most important letter that created this world is Tet. And I think I like that letter, but I also like Aleph. We're probably in Aleph, you know, Alpha and Omega. We're back to Alpha. It's all about Alpha, and that's all about sovereignty. And, you know, I think sovereignty is the issue that they're trying to erase when they say globalism. They hate sovereignty of the human or the tribe or, you know, the community. We're living in the age of Orot. That's what this incarnation, this next, I guess 70 years, right, Lowell? It is Orot, which means, and we all are familiar with it, dark to light. It's so amazing to see the whole Q movement and how it just aligns with everything I've studied my whole life. It's funny how things work, but they do begin with an idea, don't they? And an inspired idea if we're lucky and if we know how to receive it. Yeah, this is dark to light in every aspect, and especially for the human machine, the human being, to turn our own internal darkness to light. That's what it's about. So, and it's also, Kabbalah is also called becoming God.
Mm.
You know, connecting to, because we are the sparks of God.
Now this brings me.
So we elevate those sparks and we become more and more connected to our source.
Now, the other day, Roseanne, the Pope said that God is not a magician, that we shouldn't expect anything magical from him, that he's not a magician, and that we need to have a different view of what God can do for us. So this goes a little bit against what the Pope said. We know that this Pope is, of course, giving a perspective is absolutely materialistic of God.
Yeah.
And without wanting to criticize too much what he said, but it seems to me that God is, of course, maybe not a magician in the literal sense, but he has the force. No, John, you want to speak first? Or
it reminds me of Obama saying, "Oh, what does President Trump have? A magic wand? He's going to."
Yeah, but in fact, the next thing that Pope Francis said, he actually said it. He says he's not a magician. He doesn't have a magical wand. So here we are, you know, with minimizing God. Now, I saw that in the comment board, we have all our viewers writing things. As usual, they're always asking for the same question. And so this time I want to put it through once again, the real name of God. So I know that in the past we have had it once again. It's a question that, what is the real name of God? Let's start with Lowell.
I have to unmute my mic. Yeah. Well, I really don't know much about the Kabbalah and the Zohar like Roseanne and John and you. I've been learning a little bit about it the last 3 years since Roseanne got me signed up with the Daily Zohar report. I can only say what I know. I also didn't grow up religiously observant. I didn't grow up learning the Talmud. I would like to learn it. I grew up in a religiously non-observant Reformed Jewish home. It wasn't that it was Reform. It simply was that my parents joined the local synagogue for communal purposes primarily. So my learning about Jewish tradition was through studying the Tanakh, the Bible. And the way we people on the spectrum do is once we get fascinated by something, whether it's paper clips or bubble gum, I just go over it over and over and over again, and then in the Hebrew, and then in the English, and then with the commentators. There are many names of God in the Bible related to different aspects of what he is and what he does. So there's no one name for him.
Okay.
One of the things God says to Moses is, by the name I'm revealing myself to you, I did not yet reveal myself to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I would like to add something here regarding God and what John said about the ark in the temple. And one of our teachings is, in order to get to you get to the future from the present, you get to the spiritual through the physical, and you get to the general through the particular, which makes a person able to focus. What am I going to do today? The butterfly flapping its wings in Tokyo causes the avalanche, for good or bad, in Argentina. So you mentioned the term globalism. Global, 4 syllables, a nice sounding word for something very evil. Because what is it in terms of bad globalism? And who's going to destroy it? You're going right back to, again, the Garden of Eden with Satanists, fallen angels, and demons, and Cain and Lamech, and the Nephilim, and the bad Anunnaki, some of whom may have definitely survived the flood. They're referred to in the book of Numbers and other places. So globalism for us, the first anti-globalist was Abraham. Nimrod was the first emperor. And what you're really talking about, let's take that 4-syllable word and expand it. The Nimrodian, pharaonic, New World Order, Old World disorder, feudalistic dictatorship where few people are the bosses and everyone else is a slave and a servant. Pharaoh and his slaves. As my teacher, John Charles Lincoln Hulley, said, who came very much from an aristocratic background like John Barnwell, from what I've read, he said, the first thing I want you to remember, as he taught me for 30 years, he said, is we view ourselves as a class. You may marry into our class, but otherwise you're servant class. We love our animals, we don't love you. Now, that's something that servant class people, especially Jews, court Jews in Washington, don't want to hear. You're hired help in the Goy's restaurant, whether you're the busboy or the head waiter, whether you're Hudson and upstairs, downstairs, or what was her name? The star of it, who plays the maid. Jews who work in Washington, who are secretaries of state and undersecretaries of state and ambassadors with corner offices and chauffeur-driven limousines, don't like to be reminded you're hired help in the Goy's restaurant. He can tell you on Friday not to come back on Monday. He may decide you know too many things you shouldn't. You should have a heart attack, an accident, or die of cancer or fall out your window. Moral, don't work for the mob. So that's the way, that's the globalist system. Now, what did Abraham represent? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and down through the 12 sons and Ben Yosef and Ben David. Small farms, small businesses, small government. That's the Israelite model. And who's going to lead this global revolution against the Erev Rav and Amalek and uproot it to bring the Malchut Shemayim, the kingdom of God, for every person on this earth? So every person will sit under his vine and under his fig tree, and no one shall make him afraid. No bully, no coward, no tyrant, no narcissistic, psychopathic sadist. That's who's going to do that? the king of Israel when he sits on his throne again. Some of you believe, if you're not amillennial or postmillennial Christians, that Jesus is coming back. What is he going to do? The answer is stated very clearly here, Hebrew, English, the Tanakh with the basic commentators in Psalm 72. This is a psalm about what does the ideal king do. Concerning Solomon, let's just read you the first 3 sentences. Concerning Solomon, O God, give your judgments to a king and your righteousness to a king's son. May he judge your people justly and your poor people with justice. May the mountains bear peace for the people and the hills through righteousness. May he judge the poor of the people. May he save the children of the needy and crush the oppressor. And crush the oppressor. And crush the oppressor. And now that President Trump has been busy, like he made that meme or something of himself on Rocky's body, I heard an explanation, I think from Lionel Nation, said in the first 8 rounds, Rocky lets the other guy bang away at him and doesn't waste his strength. And then when the other guy is tired, in the 9th round, he gives him a knockout. That's what President Trump and the Patriots are now getting ready to do to the bad guys in New York and Washington and London and wherever they may be, including Tel Aviv.
Because we don't have an enormous amount of time and I want to stay on subject, I wanted to ask Roseanne, of course, the same question. What is the name of God for you?
Yeah, I wanted to say that. This is really an amazing subject, and I'll just talk for a couple minutes. The name of God is unpronounceable except for one day of the year. I'm able to say that name one day a year, and it's on a day of repentance. It's a holy day, and the name of God is unpronounceable. So it is taking that name in vain to suppose that you have, in all your arrogance, the right to speak it as it's part of normal language. It's not. So that name is known to only a few people who've studied a long, long time and have earned and worked to receive the ability to speak that name. It's a very holy thing. It's the holiest thing on earth. And it really sickens me to see it commonized, because it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Thank you for your take, John. For this the Rudolf Steiner posse, the anthroposophical posse, as we want to call it in modern terms, what is the name of God? Is it a name, like Roseanne said, that can be only mentioned once a year, or is it something different?
Well, paralleling what she just said, the inner workings of the Rosicrucian, the true Rosicrucian stream, not these clubs that advertise in Popular Mechanics or what have you, but the actual inner order of the Rosicrucians. When you're doing the prayers out of reverence, they don't mention the name of our Lord. And it has to do with being able to develop that whole concept, being able to receive. Again, I go back to the Grail. It's our capacity to receive that allows the miraculous realm of the world to be able to manifest on Earth. And so that's, like, for example, when Rudolf Steiner built the first Gratianum, which was subsequently burned as a result of fanatic raving, kind of the Antifa of the day in a way, on an unconscious level. But that when the Sufi master Hazrat Inayat Khan went in there, just maybe a couple months before it burnt down, he walked in and he said, he looked at the mysteries that were displayed there, and he says, I can't believe this hasn't burned down. And it did. Now, one could say, well, is it his fault? Or is he just cognitive? Or is it just what he said is the case is that these things were so sacred that it was difficult for them to be able to maintain their place in the world. And so in understanding the Rosicrucian dream, it's understanding that the Logos incarnated into Jesus of Nazareth at the baptism and entered into earth evolution, and he's already here. And the idea that he would have to come again would be basically a negation of that actual turning point of time, the incarnation and the crucifixion event. And so consequently, and out of respect to all other traditions, as Jesus said, we have other flocks. And so we're all seeing through a glass darkly. We all have pieces to this puzzle. And as Lowell and Reverend David and Roseanne and Leo, we've all concurred previously that it's not what your theories are, it's what you do upon which a judgment comes to you. And so anything that we can come up with as a creative impulse is all a part of this great mosaic we call humankind.
Thank you, John, for your take. Before we go to you, Roseanne, Father David, of course, on his take on the name of God.
Well, I mean, at this point, I've got to be a priest and remember my calling. The name of God is Christ Jesus. What is that? I am who I am. What is that? I am. You know, Christ Jesus is the fulfillment of the divine prophecy given us by the glory of Israel for a Christian. You know, how does it all fit together? I don't know. It's a mystery. But the point is, I know it does all fit together. Let me say a few other things, Leo. I think sometimes people suspect I'm the mole in this show, the socialist. Well, I'm not a mole. I'm not a mole. I don't know if any of you know. I mean, I can't remember. You know, I'm actually a libertarian, but I'm a left-leaning libertarian for one reason. I think the left raise issues sometimes that we need to talk about. Not that means I'm going to suddenly wave my dust cup in
Definitely, David, you are the only one of the pew who is allowed to go and give talks in TEDx, because I don't think any of us will even go close to them, because you know they will probably view us as the Antichrist. Go on.
I needed to say that because a few odd things are said to me. Also, globalist. Yes, I am a globalist. I'm a globalist because Jesus Christ will one day return, the Messiah will return, and we will all be under the reign of righteousness and truth. So I'm not this type of globalist, I'm that type of globalist. You know, one day the King of Israel will reign in our hearts and our minds, and we'll all be in a better place. So there we are. In terms of in the name of God, I mean, right, this is where, I mean, the process of probably transferring my clergy credentials to another church. But, you know, this is where the old Catholic, I suppose, remember, old Catholic is not Roman Catholic. This is where it manifests. Aquinas, who can doubt Thomas Aquinas, the ox of learning, you know, the archetype of teachers of theology throughout the ages, the very embodiment of the theological discourse. What is God? God is his attributes. God is beauty. God is truth. God is love. You know, how that manifests in terms of mystical names. I know in the Jewish tradition there's a mystical name. I know it should only pronounce, I thought it was once a year by the chief rabbi. I believe certain clerics were allowed to be in the vicinity, and I hope I'm one of them one day when all of that comes back. You know, so in other words, how can those attributes, those divine qualities, be given in one name? I don't doubt they can be, but I would suspect that Roseanne is completely correct. We mustn't overuse these divine things. We mustn't cast pearls before the swine, and we must just allow these mysteries to unfold as the next couple of years, with all the terrors I fear are in them, are coming on us. You know, well, I don't know, what do I see? Globalism, schmobalism, I think we're all winning. You know, the fact a show like this takes place on a weekly basis fills my heart with happiness and hope. And what did you say at the beginning there? A mighty panel. If ever there was a truth on YouTube, no, the name of God is being pronounced here and now by each one of us on this show, and his name is truth. And I'm honored to be a part of this project.
Thank you so much. Please, Roseanne.
Yes, the name is truth. Absolutely. And also part of Judaism is to internalize in your own body those attributes of God. And so this thing that I showed you, these are prayers in order to do that. So these 72 names of God are part of Judaism, and this whole thing is a prayer that if it's accessing the intelligence and the energy of the letters themselves, the letters that we believe God created itself.
Yeah.
So, there's holiness everywhere, but you can't step in the middle of it and then drag it through the mud,
One thing, Rosanna, that I always love about the Kabbalah is the Ein Sof concept of without limits. Without limits, the infinite, everything.
Yeah, nothing. It's nothingness. That something came out of nothingness. That's the big thing to think about a lot. How did that happen? How did something come out of nothing?
And he gives this reshit, this moment of beginning in Kabbalah, that is called reshit. So that is a very key moment, of course, the logos for Christians personified by Jesus.
The logos in Judaism, the logos is to put the attributes into you, to digest them, to receive them, and then to act them in this world. So that's what it's about. It's not just about worshiping some being out there. It's about internalizing all of those attributes of where we come from, our source, digesting and containing source. And that's what's missing. That is what's missing in every religion, I have to say.
Before I forget today, because we are a global program that goes around the world and everybody follows us from all corners of the world, that this is a book by a friend of mine, just published in Russia. His name is Vladimir Chenko, Hildebrand of Brantau. It's a very interesting book that actually gives us a very unusual perspective, a Russian perspective on President Trump. And it contains a study of the secret mechanism of American politics under a Russian point of view, examines also, though, Trump's messianism in the religious components of American history. And it includes fragments of a book called The Last President by Ingersoll Lockwood that actually John commented then with a mail to me in private, and I think probably to the rest of the crew. Tell us more about it, John.
Excuse me. Yeah, the Ingersoll book. That's an interesting turn of the century, last century item, so it's more than 100 years ago.
The Russians seem to connect it to President Trump. They seem to think that this book is somehow prophetic of Trump's work.
Yeah, they're saying that. And there was also that one children's book, the Baron Trump book that was out quite a few years ago, and so that people are looking at this. There's also, for that matter, this Sonora Air Club of the late 1800s, the airships, and the drawings from there where they have the airship and it has Trump drawn on the side of an airship, and then people are wondering, is that prophetic? There's a lot of things that you could look at, and I think the important thing to think is that people, in keeping with what we're saying, we have to become worthy vehicles of this experience that we're having, okay? And stop putting so much on the shoulders of President Trump. We have to be able to be capable of being a complete human being. And that's our mission. That's our goal. And Rudolf Steiner described it as the spirits of freedom and love. And see, the problem with this globalist thing is it's not loving and there's no freedom involved. So that tells you right there that why people around the world are beginning to be able to get the big picture and see through what these people are running with the Pilgrim Society and Cecil Rhodes' plan of the imperialism and you know, the Imperial Press Conference was the site where they built the BBC building. So it's a continuation. So we've covered this also extensively on American Intelligence Media and Americans for Innovation. I won't get into all the gory details, but basically what I can say is because people are beginning to come into themselves as human beings, what it does is it creates a situation to where those systems are inappropriate. That a human being can't prosper within this weird corporatized plenary oligarchy, so to speak. So at some point, there's going to be a tipping point at which the power base shifts from the plenary oligarchy, and you become decentralized. What's happening?
John,
look at the monopoly.
John, members of the panel, I announce you that I just open up. Sorry to interrupt, John, but I just open up the phone lines because I promise our viewers that we will have at least a few minutes dedicated also to their own questions. So as it seems like you are all willing to stay maybe another few minutes on board for the Pew, we will probably take also some phone calls. So those of you who are interested, our phone number is 970-577-6369, and of course +1 if you're calling from outside the United States. Now, please continue.
Okay. In any event, so I guess people have to realize, and there's a lot that can be done through nullification, through in our individual communities, like what the governor in Florida did about the Common Core education. He just said, no, we're done with that. And one person made a decision and it changed things. Now we can all be making decisions in our own lives, like trying to shift from supporting multinational corporations to supporting smaller businesses, for example. That's an incremental thing. There's all these things that can be done if you're smart about it. But one of the first things you have to do is become aware of it. You know, be aware that, yes, we had the Union in 1776, which led to the Federation in 1776, but most people have never heard of the Confederation of States in 1781. And that's the one they don't want you to know about. So that's your assignment. I want you folks to go out there and figure out what I just said.
No, it's very well put together because we are facing an enemy that not many people understand really fully. And today we are giving a different take on this enemy, which is globalism. So I'm glad that we have touched maybe on the most unusual aspects. Please, Roseanne.
I heard it said that globalism is a race to the bottom. And I like that a lot. It's like, and that's slavery.
Yeah.
Globalism is a race to reinstitute slavery, an entire slave class in every country, you know, that does the unpaid slave.
But it seems to me, Roseanne, that nowadays slavery for the elite is not essential like it was back in the days. They needed the actual physical capacity. Nowadays, like David said, they're substituting manpower with the robotic power. So in the end, now they can probably eliminate, even in China, part of the population with a virus because they know that they will have the robots doing the same job. However, there is most of mankind that in a few decades will also face, because of globalism and the increase of robotics in our society, they will face probably a very dim future. Don't you think so, Roseanne?
Well, it could go that way, but it could go the other way too. Like I always say,
put them in a virtual reality cascade, you know. in front of their Facebook and the other things, they will be deactivated from reality into another reality. And while everything in the material world is done for them by these robots, it sounds really terrible.
It could go that way, but like I always say, it only requires a change of mind to see what is available to us in terms of technology and intelligence and information and truth, what's available to the people. It could go a completely different way. And I think this time it will, because, I think that the message of Orwrote is not this time, because I mean, we have gotten this smart, and we are very, very smart, and we are very, very connected, and we're very, very capable of making a world that actually works. And I think that that's what we're going to do this time.
Thank you for that take. And of course, we are at the last minutes of our show, and we would like also to give some shameless promotion to all the members of the Pew on their various books. And we start with John. John, are you ready? Here you are.
As ready as I'll ever be. Oh, that's that one. Here they are, their books. Anyways, my books are available on eBay. John Barr, The Arcana of the Grail Angel and The Arcana of Light on the Path. And also there's paypal.me/John Barnwell 888 that's available if people want to contribute towards deepening my studies of this peculiar dilemma that we seem to find ourselves. But it's in hopes that by developing a larger picture is what I try to do within my books, and then you can contextualize what we're going through within great cycles of history, so that this 72, for example, is 1 degree precession of the equinox. That's the cycle of the ages that everybody talks about when they're talking about this is the age of Aquarius and all that kind of stuff. I used to hang out with the people from Hair, the cast of Hair, Jerome Ragni and all those people. So this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Well, we're not quite there yet. We got a ways to go yet, but it's glimmerings of moving into the future. But the thing that we can't sacrifice to achieve these goals is our freedom. Because if we give up our freedom, all is lost. And that's specifically what they're trying to target, these Washingtonian oligarch types. They want to take away our freedoms because then they can finally have us as debt slaves. They already have us essentially contractually, although we can opt out of the contract. But it's my hope that through developing a larger view, as I like what's developed in my books, that we're better equipped to be able to deal with this and end up with a wholesome result. And remember, Jesus' kingdom is not of this world. That the prince of this world is down here, and he's running the Tower of Babel.
He's pretty much in charge. And of course, I would like to remind the book I published last year, and the back cover with the symbol of the World Health Organization, almost prophetic, I would say. Though the last page is also dedicated to me holding this symbol, which of course is a symbol that is also the symbol of Mercury, the messenger of the gods. So that is another take on the caduceus. Father David, your book on Swedenborg, and of course your time for shameless promotion.
Gosh, I've got to get used to shameless promotion. I know everybody thinks I am, but I'm not. Mount Athos inside me. I'm an essayist, effectively. Essays on religion, Swedenborg, and arts, arts plural, because I look at the inspiration given by Mount Athos to theatre, to film, not so much film, which I explain in the book, paintings, literature, poetry, because it's been this unique and unending generator of creativity and freedom in European affairs. They have problems. I'm very aware that my more feminist-oriented friends don't like the fact that females of every species, and I do mean every species, aren't allowed on the mountain, because it makes icon painting difficult too, because they need hen's eggs. But, you know, that issue aside, and yes, I know it's a real issue, it's a unique cultural phenomena, something we need to celebrate and study at much greater depth. And I didn't know Lowell at the time, but British Israelism actually came up in this book. I don't know what I think of British Israelism. I know there's a very dark side to it. I know there are very interesting ideas at work there, that somehow Celts and Western people are tribes of Israel. So I mention it in passing, but I certainly think I need to explore that a bit more in the next book, the next series of essays. But, you know, one at a time. This came out last year. It's got a cover designed by my dear friend, Haralampia Roschakov, who is not only a proper aristocrat, he's a distant relation to the Romanovs, believe it or not. But they were so far away, he and his family escaped. He's an internationally known and respected artist. He's Orthodox, Christian Orthodox. It's a beautiful cover. Apparently, Haralampi, forgive me if you ever watch this, his agent really disliked it because it's got crosses on the front. And of course, the last thing you're allowed to do is have a reference to religion. So this was his way of reviving a beautiful painting and crowning my book, I believe.
Now, before I forget, you have had a small kind of confrontational problem with the Swedenborg Society that kind of didn't accept you in their fold, in their midst. You want to just talk second about it?
You know, I'm not a victim. I'm an openly gay man, but I'm not a victim. I don't buy into this gay victim culture. I don't buy into victim culture.
So you actually think that they dismissed your request because of your sexuality?
Sadly, yes. I mean, there is such a thing as cumulative evidence. You know, I'm a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, which rather puts the Swedenborg Society in its place. I sent in, all I wanted was to become a member, because I thought I've just written a book on Swedenborg, so I should become a member of the society. I wasn't seeking any glorious or lofty position, ordinary membership, so I could turn up to the bun fights, listen to some lectures, and go home with a glass of wine in my tummy. I got months of silence, and I knew something was brewing. And then an extraordinary unsigned email, you know, the unsigned bit always gives it away, referring to me as David Parry. Actually, I'm an ordained minister. Please at least be polite. And they just said, you're rejected. So hang on, it's unsigned. It's illegal to be homophobic in this country. You've not given any reasons whatsoever why you're rejecting a basic membership. It says on the website, all you have to do is fill in an application form and pay a fee. And as I say, the unsigned bit and the fact that there's an illegality to that in this country made me deeply suspicious that this rude response was really a blatant act of homophobia. I put it on the Swedenborg discussion group on Facebook. Sadly, some people seem to agree with me. You know, people just need to grow up a little. I mean, partly it's the gay. What is the gay community? I never know what the gay community is. You know, and I'm an old LGBTQ activist. You know, I've chained myself to railings with the best of them, and I used to go on all these awfully sort of robust marches. But you know, and the gay community can be its own worst enemy. You always see somebody in spandex or sparkly tights or something. But you know,
well, here in America we have Buttigieg for that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. God, I've got to come to America and run for presidency on that ticket. That is wonderful. Because it wouldn't work here. You know, but no, I mean, you know, actually, I don't think this will get.
The thing is, David, I think that, like you said, they are their own worst enemy, because when Buttigieg is giving so much importance to his own sexuality and kissing his boyfriend and all that, over all the rest, I mean, they're instrumentalizing the homosexual side of things. No, so it's not right. So thank you so much for pointing that out. Lowell, you have also a book, of course, before we go to Roseanne. And this book is also an interesting book because it talks about the Quran. And so you have a take that is unusual on the holy book of the Muslims.
Yes, before I get to my book, the theme of freedom and what we mean by freedom within law, not freedom from law, is a theme that runs through the work of every person participating in the pew, Our Lady Roseanne, and the Knights of Our Lady Roseanne's table, Sir Leo, Sir John, Sir David, and myself. But what do we mean by freedom? I wrote out, it's too long for me to read all of it, the speech that Prime Minister Churchill gave on Tuesday, June 18th, 1940, to the House of Commons in the Parliament of the United Kingdom before the complete fall of France. And he said, if we can stand up to him, he means Hitler, all Europe may be free, and the life of the world may move forward into broad sunlit uplands. And then he comes to the killer, which is what's right on the table now, what's going on with China, and the battle that is being fought all over the world. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. And that's what we're seeing with this bioweapon, the Amalekite Andromeda strain, the communist Chinese Chernobyl, the coronavirus, which was engineered to exterminate, as far as I can tell, Han Chinese, because in China you have about 200 different tribes, clans, and families. And then Churchill concludes, let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties. And so, as John said, everybody has to do what he can do at his level, in his position, do something. And so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say this was their finest hour. Now, note about British Israel and what John and David said. The lost tribes are who they are, and they will be reunited, the 12 tribes of Jacob, Israel. My problem with the Pilgrim Society and the British Israel movement of the late 1900s and Ruskin and Cecil Rhodes was their idea of British Israel was to go back to the worst aspects of the ruling classes in the kingdom of Judea and the kingdom of Israel and say, wow, that's great. Think of who we can oppress, exploit, and abuse. We'll go to our clubs and they can be our servants. And when we're tired of them, we'll use them for target practice, like the Greeks did with slaves, and it's still done today. That's my problem with them. When the real king comes to sit on the throne of Israel, this is Don Corleone with a kippah and paranormal powers far beyond remote viewing of any of the little unintelligence agencies. John wants to say something.
Yeah, over on the side here, people are wondering when I was making reference to the age of Aquarius. Ages in the precession of the equinox are 2,160 years, and the age of Pisces began in 1413, so you add 2160 to that, you get 3573. Actually, it's 74 because there is no year zero in the computation. So 35, 73, 74, rounded there is the beginning of the age of Aquarius. But it takes rotation of the Venus pentagram that brings it. So it takes a while for an age to come to fruition. It's around the middle period of an age when it becomes the dominant impulse. Although there are seedings happening at this time that are leading toward that particular cycle.
Please, David, do you want to add something to it?
Oh, just very quickly, I really would love us to discuss British Israelism. and those trends on the show. I think that would be so interesting. And if we could get to the Golem of Prague, I mean, it was one of the things we were thinking of this week. That is such a telling story.
Yeah, I mean, itself needs really a specific episode, I think.
Yeah, I mean, these issues run so deep. These topics are so deep. I think that would be a mind-blowing show.
Absolutely. So let's do it for next week. Roseanne, what do you have to shamelessly promote this week?
Well, this is my third book, and you could get all my books on Amazon, I guess. This one is called Roseanne, and I'm really proud of it. And I think it's really a good book because it offers new kind of structures to rebuild the world, starting with core humanity, your core humanity, you. And especially I like this one chapter because this one explains everything in the whole world. And it's called The Real Big Super Duper Perverse Reverse Secret. You know, because I wrote this after everybody was talking about The Secret. You know, that book, The Secret.
Yes.
So I kind of challenged all the provincial thinking of our time in here, which was a lot of fun. And also I said before that it's about how to kill Satan. And
Wow.
it has great chapters like Gethsemane. And but this is another really good chapter, Exorcism, Becoming One. Exercising the entire concept of duality.
Wow.
Trees. And how do we, you know, how we can do that.
So it has a lot of esoteric elements, this book, Roseanne.
Yeah, that's why it didn't sell. Even though I
it didn't sell.
Yeah, I went on Oprah, and this is about Kabbalah, and it's called True Tales of 10 Turning Spheres.
Wow.
And you know, because that's the world we're living in, is 10 intersecting spheres of belief and behavior. So I just hope everybody will read this book because I think it's important stuff. Here's a great chapter on pig politics. And this is based on my own trying to control the pigs overrunning my small farm. And I realized a lot of stuff about pigs.
So, okay, you have an Orwellian element here, close to the Animal Farm, it seems.
Yeah, I love that. It's kind of my own take on Animal Farm. But what I've, you know, so I wish people would get this book, and because it's got a lot of really good ideas in it, and I think that it will challenge you and the way you think. Here's a great chapter, What is a Jew? And here's a great one, Eat, Pray, Love, and Conjure Satan.
Wow.
Because I think that's what a lot of people are doing. And when you're talking about slaves, though, let me just add one horrifying thing about slavery. They don't just want slaves to do their work. Slaves are actually food. We're Soylent Green, and that's no shit.
Soylent Green. Well, that's really an ominous warning, especially when they say that corned beef in Africa these days is coming from China. And so we terminate another glorious episode of The Pew.
Queen's Wave.
Where's our prayer?
Of course. The prayer. Ladies and gentlemen, let's start with Our Lady Roseanne Barr, and then, of course, the closing prayer from our very only Reverend David. Please, Roseanne.
Okay, I pray that everybody just for a second or for as long as they can contain it, as long as you're able to contain the great feeling of love in your body and your soul and your mind. I hope everybody can contain as much of that as they're able to right now. Amen.
Amen to that. Please, David.
Amen.
It is my sincerest prayer that everybody watching this show and everyone involved in this show finds the kingdom of God in their heart and their mind in the weeks ahead, and that all will be revealed in the years as the years go by in the light of truth, justice, and freedom. May the Christ, the Messiah, come to this earth again. Amen.
Amen. And thank you so much, all of you, for tuning in. And of course, to all our panel for making this show always extraordinary with extraordinary knowledge. We are definitely the very unusual side of the web here on the pew. So tune in also next week for another glorious episode. From Roseanne, from John, from David, and from Lowell. Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom.